Hello everyone, my name is Morgan Amra and I'm going to be doing my book presentation today. I decided to do the novel 1984 by George Orwell. I initially read this when I was in high school and I just had to reread it for this class just so I could do my little refresh on this book. I really enjoyed it then, however I definitely have a different perspective on it now, but I'll touch a little bit on that a little bit later on. A fun fact is George Orwell isn't even his name. His given birth name is Eric Arthur Blair, and George Orwell was just his alias he went by when he was writing. So I honestly didn't know that until I started doing this presentation, so I thought that was pretty cool. Here's going to be a couple of pictures of him. And this book was published June 8th in 1949, so that to me is a good amount of time, between 1984 or so. I don't think his predictions were far off, maybe a little too early for 1984, but I think recently but we'll get into that later. Also, the author of this is also for Animal Farm. If you haven't read or watched this film, I think you could skip out on it. I personally didn't really enjoy it. I watched it when I was in high school, and it was a little disturbing for me, but I think the point behind it is still good. So I guess if you want to watch something disturbing, go for it. But I never read the book, so let me know. Anyways, in the corner I have a quote from George Orwell. I thought it fit pretty well with the book, just because the main character essentially is getting lied to from the government as well as the rest of the population. And so he's kind of doing this courageous act of wanting the truth and seeking the truth. And so I thought this just fit pretty well. So in a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So one of the big messages from this is kind of just a warning. That's kind of what he wants to give his readers. Mainly this is going to be on totalitarianism. Essentially that is when you've got like one major leader kind of controlling the populace, and he kind of has his hand in everything, is very controlling. And as you can maybe see in the right, it kind of encapsulates all of that. And a big inspiration for this as well was the Nazi regime and a little bit of the Stalin era. So if you can go ahead and look at this this picture right here. Oh, I could zoom in. That's fun. Anyways, this is kind of a snippet of the book, if you were to paint a scene out, I guess. So right here you could see that the women are wearing, well, these could be men as well, I'm not sure, but they're wearing Junior Anti-Sex League banners. This is because the government was against sex and therefore pushing the agenda, was putting on the population. In the back you could see war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength. You could tell they do not want their population to be educated. They don't want them to have this free will of speech, which is kind of insane to me to think about. And then if you could see in this very corner, we have the Big Brother posters watching. This is a very big thing. We'll kind of touch on it later as well. How Big Brother is always watching. Big Brother, in a sense, is not their God, but their president, their Lord and Savior. He's the one that's constantly watching their every move, and one wrong move, and yeah, we'll get into it later. Anyways, like I already said, there's surveillance 24/7. Any type of differences are kind of discouraged, and anything that doesn't follow along with the government's agenda, and then the propaganda is really pushed over the truth, and the truth is kind of ignored. So now we'll be getting into our characters. So we have our main character, Winston Smith. He's in charge of changing history to fit the government's agenda. After a while, this is when he just starts to want to seek the truth about what is actually going on. Because as he's changing this history, he's starting to get curious and starting to wonder, okay, what's actually going on? And this is when it starts to lead him to rebel against the entire government. And he's just kind of doing this by himself for a little while, and then he starts to see Julia, and then we'll get into Julia. She is the love interest of Winston. She partners with him to help them find the truth, and just meeting together collectively and having this free thought that they weren't allowed to have. And that's when they ultimately rented a house in private, kind of outside of the town, to just try to discover that proof. And that's when Winston meets O'Brien, who is an official party member of the inner party. And he comes up to Winston, claiming to be a part of the rebellion because they've been watching Winston and Julia very closely and were suspecting something. And so Winston's like, okay, like, I trust you for some reason. And it turns out O'Brien was a spy, because, shocker, and sends them to what is called the Ministry of Love. And that might sound great, however, they were sent there for re-education, where he essentially got sent his biggest fears and got brainwashed into not feeling love for Julia or anyone else but Big Brother. And so they did this by caging his head with rats, which is his biggest fear. And to the point where he shouted, "Please do this to Julia. I do not care what happens to her." And so from there they realized, okay, he's good to go, and then sets him off. And once he sees Julia outside of the Ministry of Love, they have no feelings toward each other whatsoever because he's in love with Big Brother. Yeah. So right here I just wanted to show some art about 1984, but also to kind of reflect on how I feel about this book. When I first initially read it, I really enjoyed it. However, I didn't really have a deeper thought on it just because in high school, I guess I wasn't really influenced into politics and wasn't very educated in that way. And now I feel like I'm definitely a lot more self-aware. And so to understand that, or to even try to fathom a type of dystopia like that would be really insane to think about. But I would really recommend reading this book, and I think it'd be a really good one.